According to reporting from the Globe and Mail, Ottawa is planning a multi-billion-dollar pandemic-style bailout for workers and businesses if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods as early as February 1st. The bulk of potential spending on new programs to help laid-off workers and businesses affected by tariffs will require legislative approval, which can't take place until Parliament resumes sitting on March 24th. Conservative strategist Anthony Koch joined us to explain some of the consequences of pandemic-style supports.
So here's the point. I always go back to 2015, back in those fateful debates when Justin Trudeau broke with the orthodoxy of the time to say we were going to run deficits because our debt to GDP ratio was, quote unquote, the best in the G7, and it was cheap to borrow. So we need to invest in Canadians, right? And interest rates were actually very low at this time. But here's the thing, right? It's called the rainy day fund for a reason. And this is the point that conservatives have always stressed. Even in the best of times, it is important for governments to maintain fiscal prudence. Why? Because by very definition, you don't know when a crisis or a series of crises is going to come your way. Obviously, no one could have foreseen what came with COVID-19. Now, at the end of the day, we know that the Liberal government, a lot of the spending that they did have during that time period was completely irrelevant to the pandemic. But I'm saying now you find yourselves here. Nobody could have predicted per se that Donald Trump was going to get reelected. And even if he did get reelected, that he was going to start his mandate with these massive tariff threats towards Canada and the northern border. But now we find ourselves here. We've blown the bank over the course of the last decade. And now we're going to be forced to do so again. So like we said, right, tariffs on their own are inflationary. If we implement a 25 or a retaliatory tariff of any variety on American goods coming into Canada, that means Canadians are going to see that when they go grocery shopping or when they go to buy the products that we've all, become accustomed to buying at specific price points. But then you're going to add on top of that fire these support programs that are now being hinted at coming out of Ottawa, which is going to bring us right back to where we were during the pandemic with out of control inflation. And unfortunately, the Bank of Canada is going to have to respond in some capacity. And Canadians are already bleeding, right? We've got a bunch of mortgage renegotiations and debt renegotiations coming up. People took out those lines of credit and mortgages and all sorts of things at a much lower interest rate than what's currently being offered by financial institutions. And this sort of measure is just going to force the interest rate to go up even more. So it should be a lesson for everybody. You don't know when these crises are coming, but you can always reasonably assume that a crisis will eventually come. So you have to be prudent, not just when times are bad, but also when times are good.